my best junior result was I finished second in literally my last junior event when I was almost 18. Hit the putt in on the last to win 2 up on the last, and I was like, what just happened there? And within the space of 6 weeks was fourth in the world on the amateur rankings.
Today on the Tournament Code, we're joined by Tim Stewart. Tim has been a professional golfer for 14 years and has played on a variety of tours, including the European Challenge Tour, the Asian Tour, and the Latin America Tour. Before turning professional, Tim won his national amateur championship, the Australian Amateur. Tim also competed in the 2009 British Open. Currently, Tim resides in Atlanta, Georgia, and continues to pursue a career in professional golf.
Tim, you're 37. You play professional golf. You've been out there a good while. Let's talk about the beginning and just give us a background as to how you started getting into golf. You're from Australia. You lived in Singapore and Malaysia. How does that lead to you playing golf at a young age and then even farther on?
Well, I guess the thing that probably started it was my parents were and still are golf psychopaths, in that, like, if it's on TV, they will record the PGA Tour, they'll record the European Tour, the Champions Tour, the Ladies Tour, and like my dad particularly would, like, he'd get through all that every week. I mean, that is a lot of watching golf, and like I would come home and be like, I can't watch any more golf. Like, this is what I'm doing all day. Like, don't keep hitting me with more golf. Like, there's got to be a show on or something. Anyway, so they were into golf a lot. And when I was a kid, growing up in Singapore, my dad would take me along to the driving range because it's different. It's not like in Australia, like kids would go to the beach, play football, soccer, whatever, and he would drag me along to the driving range with him. And so I started there when I was about 7, and his big thing was there because I was sort of big for my age. The membership at the club that he had through the company he worked for wouldn't let anyone on the course who was under 12. So he was like, if I get him hitting it decent, no one's going to ask any questions because he might be 10, but he looks, 12. So it was just like driving range. So I started out like get up there on my first round of golf and just like crush it off the tee and have like 16 putts, and but no one could see that, right? So the people at the club didn't care, and that's really, that was kind of the beginning. And I guess sort of without going through the whole life history, I started playing my first rounds of golf there. We moved to Malaysia when I was around 10, and then the first time I broke 90 was actually on the golf course where they used to play that PGA Tour event at it's now TPC Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. So that was kind of, it's interesting. And then to come back years later and play the Malaysian Open there was pretty cool, just as a nostalgic thing. I tend to be a nostalgic person, so it was kind of a cool thing to do. We moved back to Australia, and I was sort of playing junior golf a little bit, joined a club and was pretty good, but growing up over there wasn't really exposed to the competition that much. Like, I was always just playing with my parents or their family friends or whatever, and then getting back to Australia and seeing like, wow, there's a lot of competition around. There's junior tournaments, and kind of seeing that around, much like here where there's actual pathways. Started to get into it a bit more and kind of realized, wow, I actually probably need to work harder at this if I want to be better, because just playing socially with my parents and their friends is not really doing it for me. And then as time went on, would get to the golf course in the afternoon after school and practice. And one of my now best friends, he joined the club at the same time, and we kind of through our whole careers would bounce off each other. And he started showing up before school, so I was like, well, I got to show up before school too. So like we had this competition with each other, like who's practicing more and who's going to get to 10 handicap first, who's going to get to 5 handicap, and that kind of thing. And we're still just as competitive to this day. Like he's now a teaching pro in Australia, but we'll go out and play, and he finds game that like he hasn't seen for years, because it's like at any cost, like I can't lose. It's always good fun.
That is awesome. And you mentioned you're super competitive, and you also said you were big for your age, and you're still big now. You're 6'6", 230, absolute unit, and you played sports, rugby, I think, a few others. What led you to say, hey, golf is the sport that I want to focus on?
It's a good question. I think I don't even really know where it happened or one specific moment. It just got to a point where it's like, I'd sit there and watch, the PGA Tour and the majors with my dad, and it's like, I want to do that. I want to do that. And how much of it was influenced by, him? Obviously, he loved it, and so that was probably a big factor. And then I just really got to know the game and enjoy the game, and I really, I don't know, as a sort of segue, I guess the game of golf, I think, probably taught me a lot more than any kind of education did, having sort of done both. But golf really puts things in perspective about what life can do to you, and it helps you deal with some of that stuff too.
So you talked about playing junior golf in Australia. You obviously
Yeah.
turned professional at some point. What did the transition look like from amateur golf into professional? When did you turn pro?
So my pathway, I guess, a little different, very different to a lot of guys over here, and probably still even different to a lot of the Aussie guys. The college sports is not nearly what it is here. Like in Australia, there's not really a college sports. They do like a university games thing, but it's kind of more of a side note, extracurricular at university, rather than this is a great way to get an education paid for type of situation, And so when it got to the end of high school, wasn't doing that much with my golf. Like I always felt like I was a great player, would have some good rounds and then go to tournaments and kind of, finish 20th, finish 15th, whatever. Nothing really that great. But my best junior result was I finished second in literally my last junior event when I was almost 18. And so it sort of was like, oh, well, maybe it's just not going to happen. Right? Like you work. It's like at some point you got to make a choice. And so I got into doing hospitality management, and I did a diploma at a technical college in Australia. And at the same time, was still practicing. And about 2 weeks before that college finished, and obviously I'd been working on my game and playing some regional events and had some top 10s and things like that. And then sort of out of nowhere, I guess, but I won the Australian Amateur in April 2006. And that was like playing the tournament. I beat, because its format is like the US Open, where there's a stroke play and then they go into the match play. And I beat 4 guys on the national team, and everyone's like, who is this person? And I was like, who is this person? Right? I'm just like, every match, I'm just like, I'm going to lose. Like, just go out there, play your best, and see what happens. And got to the end and like hit the putt in on the last to win 2 up on the last, and I was like, what just happened there? Like, no idea. And so like that changed everything for me, because I honestly, at no point during that tournament, even considered that I would win, which is bizarre because it's the best mind state, right? You got nothing to lose. And from there, within the next week, I lost in the semi-finals of the New Zealand Amateur, and within the space of 6 weeks was 4th in the world on the amateur rankings, from like, kind of nowhere. And that summer over here, then came over and played. Like I started in the UK, played the St Andrews Links Trophy, the British Am, came over and played the Rice Planters Amateur in South Carolina. It was my first event in the US, finished second, blew a 7-shot lead. Like, again, just no idea what was going on. Who am I? Finished second in the Eastern Am, Sweet 16 at the Western. Like, things were, I was like, it was just all of a sudden this wave, and I was just trying to play. And I got this opportunity to play on the national team. And so I played on the Aussie team for about 2.5 years, a bit over. And that was kind of my platform to turning pro, because with that shift in 06, then it was like, okay, well, now I'm one of the best ranked amateurs like in the world, and I need to get used to that. And had a great year in 07, lost in the final of the British Am, and won a bunch of other big amateur events. Like Riversdale Cup in Australia is a big one for us. It's like our Western Am equivalent. Tasmanian Open, Singapore Amateur. Yeah, it was a big shift in over a 2-year period, and just got confidence. And then it was like, okay, well, how am I planning on, making that step to turn pro? And oh gosh, at a 22, 23-year-old kid where all this has happened, it's starting to think about, okay, well, how do I need to get my playing resume into a point where it's attractive to endorsements and people who want to throw some money behind me, because, I don't come from wealthy family. It's finding sponsorship in Australia is a challenge. So it was more, based over in the US. So I had a management company who were hanging around and trying to, do it all that way. And yeah, so it was, looking back, I wish I had some of these grey hairs that I have now, but such is the nature of life and the experience. And I ended up turning pro. I looked at what I wanted to do as an amateur, and I turned pro in 2008, and that was only because that was the year the Eisenhower Trophy was being played. And there's another tournament called the Sir Michael Banalick Trophy, which is Europe versus Asia Pacific. So that's like the closest thing we have to a Walker Cup. So they played that at Valderrama in Spain in 2008, which was like incredible. And then played the World Amateur, which was in Australia. So represent, your country at the highest level, and then basically turn pro straight after that. It was kind of my fairy tale kind of looking back. I mean, I wouldn't give the experience back, but I think I probably may have been better off turning pro in 2007. That the amateur career carries lots of prestige, and it's great, and I have all those things and those memories. But in terms of the business of professional golf, like, you can't get in it soon enough.
You talked a little bit about being on that national team in Australia, and a lot of people in the US aren't really aware of how that whole process works. Talk a little bit about how a national team works, what tournaments you played in, different ways they supported you guys, and just how that whole process works.
So the national team at that time, I was kind of right in a transition period. At that time, there was still the Australian Golf Union and like the ladies amateur golf body. They were working on how do we amalgamate, and things go slow when it's at that kind of level in golf typically. And so from my experience, the first part of my time on the national team was the old system, and then the last part was sort of the newer system as it was in its infancy, where it was all Golf Australia. And they would pay our expenses to go to all of like the national qualifying events. So there's probably a dozen events through the year, like 4-round tournaments where they're inviting international players, and like the Australian Amateur or the Riversdale Cup. And they used to have one called the Lake Macquarie International, which was just north of Sydney. And the English team would come, and lots of European teams would come out. The Canadian team would come, and so it's just a big 4-round tournament, right? And because we went kind of most of the big events here are all through the summer, because that's when everyone's off college, high school, that sort of thing. But for us, it was it's just when it is. Like if you're at uni, you just have to take the time off and do it, because this is when the club wants to have it, and you go and do it, and they do their best at trying to coordinate where there's runs of tournaments together. But we'd be playing those sort of through the year, and then amongst that, the golfing body would select teams to go to other national amateurs in the region. So like the Malaysian amateur, Singapore amateur, and various other through Asia Pacific, some in Europe, some in South America. So like I was sent on, it was actually the first Asian Amateur Championship in 2006, 2007. I don't know, it might be one of those years, 6 or 7, not sure exactly. But we played at Mission Hills in China, and it was the first one, and they were talked about all the plans and what they wanted to do. And now looking at the Asian Amateur, it's like, wow, now there's a spot at Augusta. So it's, kind of cool to be a part of history. I wish I was part of it a few years later, because that would have been nice to have that to play for. But yeah, it was a really good way to learn how to travel and play. We're getting on 10, 12-hour flights to go play amateur golf in your early 20s. It's not something that a lot of people get exposed to. So it was kind of a good way to land, be on another continent, and go, okay, what's it? Let's go play, and have a lot of fun along the way, because you're traveling with all the same guys. You're all in your early 20s and just having a blast and playing golf. It's great.
That's a cool experience to be part of, especially getting surrounded by a bunch of guys that good. You talked about in an interview one time that you've learned how to score well when you're not playing your best. And there are days where you just can't hit it, but you still get it in the hole. And I want to relate that back to that run that you had where you won the Australian Am, as you said, finished runner-up at the Rice Planters, Eastern Am, Dunes Medal, Yuwani Open, all within the span of a year. You go from essentially not being a known commodity to being ranked. And someone might look at that, or they might look at the Australian Am and say, oh, he had a good time here. Like, he just played out of his mind right there. But to do that in event after event after event, and then over a series of events, you can't bring your A+ stuff every day. You can't have luck on your side every round. So there's more to it than that, and you learn really fast as far as all that goes, that you're not going to be out there with your best. So how did you learn that in such a condensed period of time?
I think learning's a funny thing, in particular when it comes to golf. I think you learn things along the way at a steady pace, and I think golf has a way of paying those out in dividends that doesn't seem apparent. It could be years, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, well, let's just give him a little run. Not to personify it too much, but I remember consciously thinking, because people asked me that year. I was talking to reporters, and they're like, where did this, you were doing this and now you're playing. I said, honestly, I'm just trying to stay out of my own way. Like right now, I'm just teeing the ball up and I'm hitting it, and I'm trying to not overthink it too much, because, I'm just out there playing as best I can. I'm trying to plan my way around the golf course, hit the shots, and hole putts. And I really just, even in my own mind, was just trying to think, just keep riding the wave as long as you can, because it's the nature of waves. And which on one hand is, it was a great way to stay out of my own way, but on the other side, when I started not playing quite as well, then your mind goes into this phase of, oh, maybe this is the back end of the wave. So how do you get to a point where your waves are only positive? That's the hard part.
Do you have an answer for that hard part?
I do. I think, I guess it's more of a philosophy in that, when I'm hitting it well, like golf's easy. Everyone's had those days, right? So my goal is, I just want to really always work on how can I play ugly. Like when it's going pear shaped, what can I do to know I can get it around ugly? So like at that time, I really had a good system where, my swing at full speed didn't feel like I had much control. I had these like knockdown shots that were just super reliable, and I carried this one iron that I hit. It's Ping Eye 2, the old classic thing, and the thing I loved about it was it had one shot. It's like its weakness was it had one shot, but its strength was also it just had that one shot. It's just this flat draw that goes like 15 feet in the air. So hitting it into a par 5 over water was kind of useless. But off a tee, when I couldn't keep things in control, I just hit that, and always, just go back to, okay, how do I just put it in play and keep things simple, and that sort of mitigated some of that bad stuff. So kind of learning how to play ugly, then eventually you kind of get through that barrier and hit some good shots, make a few birdies, and you can end up saving your day, and then you're out there the next day and feeling better about things.
That's a good philosophy to have, and it's something that obviously you get when you have that experience. But when you're making this type of progression, and when you were going through that type of progression, you had a part-time swing coach and a video camera, and that was about it from my understanding. We've talked about the mental side, but the technical side is something that when you look at your golf swing, it's a pretty golf swing. And as far as the actual effects of what's going on at the ball, there's a lot of good things happening there. How did you get to that point, and how much do you work on that, and how much did you work on that?
It's funny, perspective's an interesting thing. When I look at my own swing, I just go like, I just want to throw up. Like we're all our own worst critics, right? And there's certain things in my golf swing I've been working at for a decade or more, and that's all I'll ever see. So it's and high definition cameras don't help, because I can get in there even closer, and that's not where I want it to be. Why is that there? But I've always had trust issues, particularly when it comes to my game. My dad taught me until I was off about a 7 handicap, and it just got to the point where he just didn't have the knowledge to keep me moving forwards, and went to a few different coaches who tried different things, and didn't really feel like that was how I wanted to play, and that probably didn't help me. And me being me, I knew everything. What do they know that I don't know? Like, one thing I would say, probably the best piece of advice I could give anyone else is you know everything until you're about 30, and then you realize, shit, I'm never going to know everything, but now I want to know more. That's, excuse the language.
No, you're good.
But it's funny, like my dad would say this to me, so I'd just be like, oh, I just never say anything right. I can't help. I can't give you the advice, and it's exactly like I knew everything. So it's just, call that life experience. But as it related to my golf, I was very protective about any adjustments that I wanted to make. And even getting into the national team, they had this requirement like, oh, we want to see your stat books and things like that. And I've never been one to back down from an argument. So I was like, well, I got here doing it this way, and now you want me to do it a different way. Pretty sure my way is working just fine. So no.
What were some of the specific things they wanted you to change?
It wasn't so much mechanics, but they wanted me to. I was very fortunate at that time, and I regret not using it more, to have access to a guy named Ramsey McMaster, who in a lot of ways was kind of the pioneer for golf fitness. Like those spiky balls, the purple spiky balls you see, like that was his. He bought some from a kid's store and was like, I need someone to make this but firmer, because this isn't enough, right? So I've still got 2 of the originals with me that he gave me. You should definitely look him up. He passed away, unfortunately, in 2011, I think. But I mean, you go talk, like, I've done the TPI training, and they talk about him, and he I was very fortunate to have access to that. But side note, they wanted me to be a lot more involved in that, getting my body right, like doing all the right things. Hindsight, me sitting here looking back was like, what an idiot. Like, they were trying to get me to do all the right things, and I was way too stubborn to listen to anybody else at that point. And so, yeah, there was the physical side, and they definitely wanted me to use a statistics program that I found a little bit clunky, and just all their checks and balances. Because as an organization, like now I understand, like they needed a way to measure the performance other than just score. And for me, I was just measuring everything on score and feel. And which is fine in your 20s, right? You can pretty much do whatever you want. As you get older, it's like, okay, well, now my back's sore and my wrist is sore. And it's like, well, that's because you do this and this and the other thing in your golf swing, and you probably didn't, stretch that and work on these areas that we're trying to work on. So it's, you learn from your errors. So I wish I was a little less headstrong, but at the same time, that put me where I was in a way,
So statistics program that they wanted to use, I guess it was long before strokes gained and everything like that.
Well,
so
yeah.
Was it just basically number of putts, greens hit, up and downs?
They were actually, I would say in Australia, they were pretty ahead in terms of keeping better metrics, really proximity from the hole. And a program that developed off the back of that was one called Shots to Hole. I'm not sure if you've heard of it or used it. It's not really a strokes gained app, but it's totally web-based, fills out really quick. But everything is like, it's all relating from the hole backwards. So how far, what club, all that sort of thing. And with that, you can work out your own strokes gained per se. I still kind of find the strokes gained, it gets to be, there's a little bit like, well, what's the baseline? Because there has to be, like, even in the apps, like there's a certain assumption, like this is where the baseline is. Obviously on the tour, the big tour, PGA Tour, they're keeping the stats all through, shots to hole. And so then they can say, okay, well, this is what the winner did. And then everyone can work off the back of that, or what's the average top 10% of each stat and things like that. So, data is it's the commodity of today. That's the big thing that does everything. So this is, at least I can benchmark myself. So I can say, okay, well, where am I losing on what I normally do? So I can go into my rounds and go, okay, what's my best third that I've played? And then what did I do well today and what did I not do well? Or what over this period? Or what, when I put this new driver in, how's my driving been for this 6 months compared to the previous 6 months? A lot more information based, which is very different to how I was in my 20s.
But as you've gotten older, I imagine, as you said, you've gotten more at least stats focused. And I know when it comes to the golf swing, you're TrackMan level 2 certified. So more as far as that data at impact. What led you to that? Was it, I'm getting older, I need to find ways to improve things as efficiently as possible? And what do you do now to pay attention to those types of stats?
So, like in terms of TrackMan data or on-course stats?
In both cases.
Okay. So I guess that I probably need to fill in a bit of the history blanks there, and so I played for 6 years through to 2014, and then had, like, my dad was pretty sick, broke up for a long-time girlfriend, run out of money. I'm just like, I can't do this right now. I need to stop. So I ended up stopping, and I did my PGA bridging course, which in Australia, to become a PGA Pro, it's a 3-year apprenticeship, which is 3 years worth of assignments, as well as you got to work in the pro shop 40 hours a week, all that sort of thing. And there's a playing test. But the bridging program is for guys or girls who have played on a major tour for at least 5 years, which I qualified for. So I didn't have to do the playing side. They basically give you those 3 years worth of assignments you've got to finish in a year. And then you do like 200 hours of various different disciplines in the golf business. and then you get your qualification. So that was good. It kind of gave me something else to do, and I was doing various. I was greenkeeping for a while there, just to try and, while this is all going on. And having finished that, went into an assistant pro role and started doing some teaching. Realized working under a boss didn't suit me. No surprise there. And got a really good role at a nice country club in Sydney called Terry Hills Country Club, and I was the head teaching pro there. And they very kindly, bought a TrackMan, and I'd already done the qualification at that point and started implementing into my lessons. And 2 years went by, and I found myself being quite bored giving the same lessons, still feeling that competitive desire. And so often I'd find myself saying things to my students, like, you can't fix what you can't measure, you can't do, and thinking, what a hypocrite, because if you'd have done this when you were playing, you wouldn't be standing here teaching right now. So when I decided to quit and get back playing, I told myself, I'm not going to do what I did before. I'm going to measure things. I'm not going to use emotions to make choices. I'm going to use information, and the more information I can get, the better, effectively. And that's why I've been a lot more diligent about my stats. Like, part of my work day, is my pre-round warm-up, and then, like, before I get to the course, and then how I warm up. Even how I warm up is written down. Like, I warm up with the same clubs, the same process, the same number of balls. Like, how do I make this a routine? Not like, oh, let's crack the knuckles and let's see how it goes. I want to make this, like, I don't have to think. Like when people go to work, then you wake up, you make yourself coffee, get in the car, go there, you've got your work. Like, you've got a routine, and in most people's cases, someone else is deciding what that is to a degree, But for me, for a golfer, or any sports person who effectively runs their own business, it's like, well, what am I going to do today? Wake up, oh, it looks sunny, maybe I'll go to. It's like, no, like, how do I make this autopilot a little bit? Because if you're always making those choices, you make good and bad. But if you've figured out a recipe, and that recipe gets you in the wheelhouse of where you need to be, then, you might change how you warm up, because you feel like, I just don't feel like I'm loose. It's like, maybe I need to spend an extra 5 minutes on, X, Y, Z in my pre-warm up, or I need to hit a few extra bunker shots to make sure that, that feels better, or trying to get that recipe down. And being a little more that way helps take the emotion away, which, it's not really, the emotion is, as someone who, I would describe myself as a passionate and emotional person, but people who play golf with me would say that, I'm just relaxed and chill. And it's like, that's the exterior, because if I let that cat out of the bag, like, she's not coming back in, if that makes sense.
Do you keep a practice journal or something of that nature?
I have, but I have, again, not been as diligent with that as I could be. Like, was going through my diaries the other day, and there's, several months where I've written down what I worked on today, what was good, what was bad, and even what my plan for the day was in my practice. It's very helpful, and I should be better about that. I don't know, but life, and I am still who I am. So it's hard, because I want to, trying to do everything. I would love to, and sometimes life gets in the way, or it could be someone stops for a chat, and by the time you get home, I got to cook dinner, and then, oh, I forgot to do that yesterday, but I got to get to practice today, and they're just excuses at the end of the day. But I do think a practice journal is very helpful, for sure.
One question I had was regarding your warm-up routine. You have this rigorous process that it seems that you go through as far as making sure you're in the same spot all the time and help conditioning yourself so when you end up in these pressure filled circumstances, they're not unfamiliar to you. And the first part of that comes with having your body in a good place. What exactly does your pre-round warm up look like, the one before you get to the course? And then when you get to the course, how have you structured your warm up on the range, on the putting green, etc., to get that same feel?
So for me, I have a framework I want to go through, like physically. So that might change, like the process for the week in terms of where things are done, like whether it's in the hotel room at the golf course, is going to change depending on like how far am I staying from the course. Is there a bus this week? Is there a locker room? Does it have facilities to be able to stretch? What are they, what's there? So, when you turn up to the course on a Monday or sometimes a Tuesday for a tournament, some of that, call it due diligence, you go for a practice round, but also what's here? Like, do I have a locker? Do I have, is there a good place I can stretch? Because playing some tournaments like in the Philippines, there's no driving range. There's just a chipping green and a practice bunker. So it's like, okay, how do I, so I effectively came up with 7 or 8 different routines that can cater for some of those different circumstances. So rather than be surprised, it's like I've got a plan for that. So for example, with and I'll get into my routine, but if you ever get to a place and you're short on time or there's no range, the bunker is the first place to go. That is hands down the best place to warm up your body to go play golf. Understanding that the driving range is not a place where you always do the same thing. Like when you go to warm up before you play, you're there to warm up, not hit perfect shots. So delineating that difference, most people go to the range to help their mind. Like, oh, okay, I'm hitting it pure. That feels good. Now I'm ready to go play. It's like, but how often do you take that to the golf course? Like, it's rare, if anything. It's like, so what am I trying to do with the driving range in my warm-up is to warm up my body ready for play, regardless of the result. So I would, to get back to you, ideally, let's say I use the scenario of golf course has a good locker room, there's somewhere to stretch, has a range. I would want to show up there 2 hours before, and I would do my various stretches, foam rolling. For me, it's important to loosen up my hips, my thoracic, do like a 5-minute little core thing, not to get tired, just to create alertness. Glutes, kind of get all of those things where, it's kind of a light sweat effectively. And from there, I would, again, depending on the tee time, if I was before sort of 9 a.m. or after 12 p.m. of the tee time, I would want to have a quick bite to eat. And then I want to be on the range. Well, no, correction. I want to be on the putting green 50 minutes before I tee off. Again, depending on how long the walk is to the tee. So I will add X amount of time depending on how far that walk is from the driving range to the putting green. And why I say start in the putting green is I want to go through my putting routine, which is always going to involve, I'll start with, probably 10 minutes, maybe a bit less of mechanical work. So I'll typically just put down my alignment stick on a straight putt and just kind of go over some of my technical feels. Use the mirror for a little while. Like that aspect of it can adjust depending on what I'm working on. But it's kind of like, this is my technical refresher period. Then that's done, throw that back in the bag, and then I will hit 12 short putts, 3 to 5 feet, depending on confidence levels. Like if I feel like the greens are tricky or I'm not putting that great, I will come into 3 feet and do it on 4 points of the hole. So like, using the clock, 12, 3, 6, 9, so that I'm all breaks, all speeds, that kind of thing. And the goal of that is get used to the ball going in the hole. This is straight out of the Bob Rotella playbook. Get used to listening to the ball go in the hole. Then I will do speed drills. So find a 20 to 30 foot putt without much break. And even if that's just putting a tee between 2 points, because in a lot of cases, there's 30 guys on the putting green, there's no holes spare. So I'll just walk to like a fresh piece of green and just put 2 tees between those 2 points and putt 3 balls each back and forth. Because again, my theory being that if I'm not dealing with break, I'm just trying to calibrate my brain to the speed. So if I can judge the speed in both directions on the same putt, my speed's done, checked. Like, tick that off. You know what I mean? So rather than just kind of whack them around the green and trust your eyes, it's like you're actually dealing with a few more fixed variables. And then after that, I will hit sort of 6 to 8 foot right to left putt and left to right putt with full routine. And once that's done, I'll put it in the bag and walk to the range. And then when I get to the range, same idea, going through various clubs of like, I'll start with usually my gap wedge. This if it's cold, I'll start with a gap wedge, go to an 8-iron, then a 5-iron. And if it's warm and my body's feeling good, I'll start with a pitching wedge, go to a 7 and then a 4-iron. Only reason being having some variety is I don't want to wear out the same club. Like everyone warms up with like an 8-iron or whatever. Well, eventually the 8-iron looks like, it's been hit
that
a lot
face
and everything
gets
else
messed up.
Exactly. So I do try to rotate what I warm up with, and then in practice, I'll practice with something that I don't warm up with. That makes sense, to try and spread the load a little bit. Just to, preserve the life of the set. And then typically, I'll probably hit a lot of the wedges until I feel like, starting with pitch shots and then getting longer and longer till I feel like I'm making full swings. Then the same with the 7 or the 8-iron, get to the 4 or 5-iron, hit a few of those, and then I might hit 3 of my driving irons. With the woods, I might hit 2 or 3, but if I hit 2 really good ones, let's put it back in the bag, and driver anywhere between 1 and 5. But like there's been times I put the driver in, make a swing, pump it, and just put the head cover back on. Because it's like, what am I here to do? To stand here and watch myself hit all these great drives and tell everyone how good I am? Or am I here to just get my body warm and feel comfortable? So like if I can stand up there and slot driver, it's like, well, that's it. I'm good. I'm ready to roll. And then I'll finish with just hitting like some chip shots and some flop shots, just on the range, like trying to pick a random target on the turf there, just to kind of get a feel for the chipping. And if there is a chipping green close to the tee, I'll try to hit 2 or 3 minutes of chips before going to the tee. But that's like an optional one, if that makes sense. It's because I feel like I try and do that on the range already, because in some cases like it's at the opposite end. But I've gotten pretty diligent with sticking to that, and sometimes it can be a bit tricky because the range is typically way further away than the putting green. But the benefits of finishing on the range, finishing your warm up on the range, like it just logically makes so much more sense to me, and you see it with like all the experienced guys I've ever played with have done it that way. But we grow up with this: go straight to the range, hit balls, then hit putts, then play, because it's a distance progression. But the logical progression is not like that, right? It's like, why I should just hit shots and then go straight to the tee, because my putting is like, you're used to having big gaps between your putting. Why am I going to take huge gaps between the hitting? I get on the first tee and I'm cold again. So yeah, just trying to put logical structure behind things.
That's a smart way to do it. And I want to touch on 2 things. One, you had talked about the bunker being the best place to warm up, especially if you didn't have a range. Could you dive into that a little? And then after that, I was interested, you talked about how you try not to wear too much of your clubs, use them over and over and develop that wear on them. How often are you replacing clubs, and it does vary by club?
So I'll start with the bunker. The bunker is a great place to warm up because if you think about, if we go back to the principle of, okay, why do I, in my warm up, what is my goal? It is to warm up, right? So what am I warming up? Movement of the body. So the bunker gives you the ability to, obviously you tend to be a little more squatted down, so you're going to be loading into the glutes a bit better. There's a decent amount of rotation because, your average bunker shot's sort of like a 60, 70 yard shot, effectively. So there's a lot of movement of the body. You're feeling that like strike on the ground. So it's, in terms of what the body's feeling, there's a lot of similarities there. So like you go hit 10 or 15 bunker shots, you probably work up a little bit of a sweat. Like, and for me particularly, like I've always struggled with losing the club underneath and then kind of sort of flipping it over and hitting it right to left. So I work really hard on trying to keep the club outside my hands and work it left, as is the popular terminology, which the bunker is all about that, right? So for a lot of the feels that I've used for my game, I've found it very, very helpful working on those particular feels. But in terms of just dynamic body warm-up, the bunker gives you everything the range gives you. It just doesn't give you the visual of hitting that, pretty iron shot or whatever. But hitting a pure bunker shot's pretty satisfying too. And with regards to the irons, how often am I replacing? As little as possible. Obviously, the financial standpoint, but even when I was under contract with clubs, once I found what I liked, I'm very reluctant to take that out. And it'd have to be, I remember I was using a lob wedge for a while there that it was concaved in the face. And the pro at my golf club was like, what are you doing? Like, how are you still using this? Like, well, I don't want to change. They've got a new model and it's different. Like, it's the hard part. The golf business is like turning over all these new clubs, and the new model may not be the same as the old model. It's like, when I find what I like, I should just buy like 10 of them and then just put them in the cupboard in storage. Like, so that because there's so much that's changing around you all the time anyway. When you find what you like, it's nice to have that. But in terms of wear, obviously the wedges go, within a year you start losing some of that performance. Probably even less than that, but within a year, like probably in good shape on a full season. Irons probably not so much. You see a guy like Steve Stricker, he's still using those, was it like 718s or I forget exactly, well, 714.
Daniel Berger's still playing the TaylorMade MCs, I think, the ones that had that hexagon screw in the back.
Yep, exactly. And I think they must have been for like 2014 or something, right? Like 13.
I had those clubs, so that was 2012 maybe even.
There you go. So
Adam Scott was still using the 690 MBs.
And he had a set of those 680s because he's always, he's been Titleist like since he was in college, really. And I remember seeing a set of his. He had like they said 690 on them, but they're like what became the 680s, and then they did like the 660s and things, all variations on it. But for him, like, no, he hasn't changed. Like, it's, yeah. So looking at a lot of the TrackMan stuff explains a lot of the rationale behind that too. In that, once you get up to like an 8 iron and above, it's not really making a huge difference. Although I would say I did use one set of clubs for 5.5 years. They were Maxfly Australian Blade. Like, love those things. I'd still be using them if I could, but they had U-shaped grooves on them. And I found that as they got more and more and more worn, I would get flyers from less and less grass. Like, if I was playing on a ryegrass where the fairway was just like, just a little longer, I could potentially catch a flyer. And I was like, I can't playing like this. But maybe that was technique too. I don't know. Looking back, it'd be interesting to see. But they were illegal anyway, so I had to stop using that when that rule changed.
You bring up an interesting point with, playing on ryegrass. You've traveled so much throughout your career playing on all types of different courses. What do you do to try to prepare for different conditions, different grasses, all of the above?
Good question. Mostly it's just mileage. I would say the putting, for a while there, I used to travel with 2 putters. And if I came to a course, because a lot of the Asian tour events, you're jumping from like Korea to India down to Malaysia, Singapore. So, you go up to Korea, and one of the courses we played there actually, I think it's where they played one of the PGA Tour events, but it's Hazley Golf Club, and it's pure, like bent grass everywhere, just immaculate, amazing. And then the next week we go to Taiwan to play at a course called Tam Sui, which is Taiwan Country Club, and the greens are rolling at like 7. So it's a significant amount of variety. So I would often travel with 2 putters, one more for Bermuda style greens or really slow greens, and the other one for more what I was used to in like my home course in Australia would have pretty quick greens most of the time. Just because I didn't want to kind of have to make the changes in my stroke at that point. Looking back, was that right? Was that wrong? I think it was right, but I also think it was kind of a band-aid for a bigger issue that I didn't recognize at the time. I think now I use quite a heavy putter, but I don't have an issue with it on fast greens, if that makes sense. But in terms of getting used to different grasses and things like that, really it's just, you just have to play on it, see how the ball reacts, and then I think the real skill is being open to the adjustment of what it's like where you are. And I remember seeing this. I played with James Nitties many years ago. I think I was still an amateur even. He's an Aussie golfer, lives out in Texas, but he got on the PGA Tour a few times, and I played with him, and I noticed he was walking off all his iron shots in the practice round. Like, he would figure out how far that went and just kind of taking note of, I'm in this place playing my practice round. I had 170 and hit my 8 iron or hit my 7 iron or whatever, and it flew 175, and just making a note of that. And like, do you start to see a trend of things? And having that kind of mentality where it's just paying attention to how far is the ball going for me in these conditions off this turf. It kind of gives you a baseline you can take then to the tournament. So I think that the biggest skill is that, I relate it back to amateur golf where someone's like, the 6th hole at Druid Hills, I always hit this club. That's just what I hit on this hole. Like, yeah, but it's 40 degrees in January and then it's 110 in August. Like, the physics doesn't care what club you hit. Like, you need to understand that it's going to be different. And so, sort of trying to be the opposite of that mentality and actually be open to being able to adjust on the conditions of that particular day or golf course, or even, altitude and all that sort of stuff.
You bring up something that's important. You talked about switching grasses and switching putters and how it was different when you're playing it over in Asia. And something that we haven't talked a lot about with you today, you're such a wealth of knowledge. We've got so many places we can go with it, but one of them was how much you've played. I'll do a quick run through. 2009, you played the Asian Tour. 2010, mainly on the European Challenge Tour. 2011, Asian Tour. 12, 13, Asian Tour. 14, China Series. 14 to 17, you took that break. 2017, you had one start on the Australasia Tour. 2018, 2019, played on that tour as well. And then 22. You played on the Latin America tour. That's a lot of traveling around. That's a lot of jumping around, and it's a lot to have to manage. How have you learned, one, to manage all that travel, and two, you're playing these different courses. What do you do for your practice rounds to help you be prepared for a course coming up to it, especially given that conditions are changing week to week and country to country?
The good thing about golf is it doesn't matter where you go, you still got a golf course, right? So the consistent part is, okay, there's 18 holes there, and I need to figure out the best way to get around for me. So I'll try and start it in order of like, okay, so the travel. I mean, travel's not that hard. It's taxing, if that makes sense. Like, living in the States now, everyone always asks me like, oh, how do you deal with those long flights? It's like, it's easy. I pay my money and I get on. Like it's what I like to call a roller coaster mentality. It's like I'm not the greatest with heights, and roller coasters kind of freak me out, but I really like, I love cars, I love going fast, and I always enjoy roller coasters. So my roller coaster mentality is, look, all I got to do is go get on, get bolted in, and then I'm going to be way too embarrassed to get off. No one's like, at that point I'm in, right? So if all I do to my body is just get me onto that seat, get me bolted in, the rest is not up to me anymore. And hopefully I'm doing it somewhere that's safe, which in this country, fortunately, it is. And so it's the same with travel. It's like, look, I don't love the 17-hour flight from Houston to Sydney going back to Australia, or too many to count. But it's always the same. It's like, look, just maybe have a beer, kind of get on the plane, sit down, and just turn on the movies and just get through the movies, and then at the other end I will be there. And it's not that different. Like if you've got to get on a flight, like let's say from Atlanta to New York, in some ways I find that way more frustrating, because it's like it's just beyond driving, because it's it's long enough you wouldn't want to drive it, but you've still got to deal with all the garbage at the airport, the security and the crowded plane, and the bin space is full, and it's like it's kind of the same. It's just you have a bigger gap, and generally you'll have a more comfortable seat because they're bigger jets doing those flights. But the travel side, it's still okay. How am I getting to the airport? How am I getting, like, what flight am I taking? That's booked. Have I booked a hotel? And then are there taxis around, or do I need to rent a car? So it's kind of the same framework, whether it's playing Challenge Tour in Europe or Latin America or flying out to Asia, whatever it may be. Trying to not complain about it, if that makes sense. In the same way, if you've got to sit in traffic to go to work, if you every day came home and were like, oh, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, like you're really gonna struggle, So getting into a space of just a flight, just get on, get off, and get on with it. In terms of how to adjust, jet lag is always the biggest problem I found in terms of adjustment, and that's really you just got to play through it. No other way. Like you just have to tell your body, well, suck it up. We're going to go out there and we're going to play, and then at some point you're going to get to bed, and then I'll rest the body. I'll give you some rest, and then we'll feel good. So that's the travel side of it. On the playing side, at a practice round, the most important thing for me is like, okay, what am I going to hit off the tee? What's the driving line? What's the widest part of the fairway, weighed up with what's giving me the best scoring opportunity? In that, like, well, 3 iron's the widest part of the fairway, but the hole's 450 yards, so that's probably not a great idea either, because then I've got to do it again. It's like, whereas if I hit driver, what's that crossover between my comfortable places to being assertive but not being stupid, and that's typically how I'll try to break the course down. And then it's just iron shots into greens, trying to figure out how is the green broken down, like where are there any spots that really just don't bother playing for, because the percentages are not in your favor, and and, and trying to sort of map that out in the book. So typically, I'm not that concerned about how I play in a practice round. I see quite often, a lot of guys will hit a bad shot and be like, "Oh, I got to drop another one to hit a good shot," and there's nothing wrong with that. It's everyone's comfort level. For me personally, I just found, like, what am I out here to achieve? It's like, I'm not out here to practice. I'm out here to see the golf course. So if I get in on a Monday and I can do that, take care of that part of that work, it's like, all right, well, now I've got a plan. Now Tuesday I'll come out and I'll try and play that plan if I've got that time luxury. If I don't have that time luxury, I've still got a plan. So then I can, if it's Thursday and I get out there, then that's what I'll try and do. And I would say more recently, something I started doing in China was just trying to do 9 holes each day, because practice rounds are typically very, very slow. And after, 3.5 hours for 9 holes, my focus ability starts to drop off quite quickly. So I found if I did it in 9-hole blocks, I got a lot more consistent information. And particularly when it's hot, like in Asia, and it's 100 and 100% humidity. It's like, it's just, your body's losing so much fluid so fast. It's really hard to stay focused for that long. And so trying to do it in 9-hole blocks, I do. If I might fly in Monday morning, I try and get out for 9 in the afternoon, 9 Tuesday morning, and then if the opportunity's there to play Wednesday, play 9 on Wednesday, or play the Pro-Am if I was in the Pro-Am, but not trying to take too much out of the tank at the start of the week. That makes sense.
It does make sense. And I like your mentality that you have with a lot of these things, which is focusing on getting to the point of what something is for, not focusing on the externalities. When it comes to warm up on the range, it's not about having the best golf swing on the range. It's not about hitting the best shots on the range. It's about getting your body ready. When it comes to the putting green, it's about seeing some putts go in and making sure that you have the speed that you need for the week, not holding a bunch of 15-footers or something like that. And when it comes to getting to your practice rounds, it is about focusing on where you need to be for the week and not what score you shoot in your practice round, if you're even keeping score, what the shots you're like, the shots that you're hitting out there are like, and that, oh no, I hit a bad shot today, that means I'm going to hit a bad shot on Thursday. It's all about compartmentalizing and accepting. If you get very superstitious about it, all of a sudden that one bad swing on Tuesday affects your swing on that hole on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It can be a lot to take in. And so kind of jumping from that, you've learned a lot over your years, and one of the tournaments you've played in that I'm sure you get asked about a lot, and that is the 2009, you played in the British Open. What was that like? What did you expect it to be like, and what was it like actually being there?
I mean, that's like, wow, I want to do this every week. It's probably the only way I could say it. It's, you imagine, it's just like playing golf in a stadium. Like every hole, there's massive grandstands that line the hole. And I've played in a lot of big tournaments. Like Singapore Open, all the Aussie events. And there was some grandstands around. But like typically, it's the last few holes. But at the Open, it's like 1, 2, 3. Like there's big grandstands everywhere. I was lucky enough to be the first group on the second day, the way the waves were split. So I was teeing off at 6 o'clock, and there's like 2,000 people in the grandstand behind me. Like, this is insane. So it's a different experience to a lot of other tournaments, but just yeah, I mean, incredible. Just out there with, it's where you want to be. Like as a kid, you're like, oh, this is, to play the British Open was exciting, and I think I was nervous for, I missed the cut there unfortunately, but for those 2 rounds, like I was nervous every hole, like the whole day, but in a good way. It's like I had a friend of mine who'd played at Birkdale the year before, and he's like, look, you just go, like, do all the things you know you're not meant to do, but just go have fun and enjoy it. It's like, go hang out on the range, go hang out at the equipment trucks, go hang out in the players' lounge, like, just, enjoy it. And I was really glad he gave me that advice, because you never know when it's going to happen again, if it's going to happen again. And I was really happy the way my family came over, and one of my best friends caddied for me. It was yeah, great experience, unbelievable. I did also learn. I did also learn a very interesting lesson that week. I played with Ben Curtis in one of the practice rounds, and he would have shot, I don't know, 85. Like, he just hit it everywhere. And the following day, he was tied for the lead at 6 under. And I remember looking at that, and that was, one of the things that contributed to my philosophy on practice rounds, was like, they just don't matter. They really don't. So what if you hit 15 shanks? Hit them on a Wednesday, because statistically you're not going to hit them on a Thursday.
I love that.
What course was the British Open at that you played?
It was at Turnberry. So that was the year where Stewart Sink beat Tom Watson in the playoff. That's a great golf course too, that one. I love that place.
Was it as hard as you expected, or was it harder?
Course setup was actually easier. I was lucky enough to play the British Am the previous year was at Turnberry, and British Am's usually like end of June, around that time. And the weather was like cold and rainy, and the grass was thick, like 3 foot thick, left and right of the fairways. It's a tough golf course, and so I played it in those conditions. Then to come to the British Open a month later, like, figuring out why it's always the third week in July is because typically third week in July is the best time of year, particularly you get up into Scotland. And it was sunny, and it was probably 65 degrees. And because of all the stands and the people, right, which we didn't have at the British Am, all the long grass was like trampled down in a lot of places. So there were shots there, like, guys, I was lucky enough to play with Matt Kuchar and Damien McGrain in those first 2 rounds. And I don't even remember if it was me or those guys, but, sprayed the ball a couple of times, and we get out there and we find it because there's people there, and they've, stomped down all the grass so you can see the ball. Whereas in the amateur, like, it's just lost. Like, you're not finding it. It's, there's buried cars in there kind of stuff. But with the tournament, it opens up a little bit more. So in that regard, I thought, wow, it's a lot easier. And I don't mean to say it was easy, because it's definitely not easy. It's just that it's the difference between a professional and an amateur tournament. There's certain logistics where you just can't have that cabbage growing around next to the fairways, because speed of play and the infrastructure of getting people in and out. But often it's much better to be 30 yards offline than 5.
That's a cool experience to have. And I got 2 questions left. And you said you're a sentimental guy. One of the things that is always cool to learn about your guests is what their favorite memory of a golf tournament is. You've played in a lot of stuff. You've had a lot of up and downs. What's your favorite memory of a golf tournament?
Well, wait, that's a tough one. I may have to go with 2. The first one is the qualifying that I did for the British Open, which I did at the international qualifier in Singapore. They timed it in with the Asian Tour, and it's a funny story. At least I think so. Sentosa golf course, the Serapong course, it's awesome. They played Singapore Open there a bunch. You would have seen it on Golf Channel when they did the European Tour co-sanctions there. And played really good. I remember on the second day, I chipped in on the 13th, and I just remember thinking, this is the day where things go right for me. Like, this is going good. And so I was like 4 under at that point, and it's a tough track. And I bogeyed 16. I bogeyed 17, and then with sandwich in my hand on 18, which is a par 5, I like was so nervous I could barely feel my hands, and I like blocked this sand wedge into the bunker, didn't get up and down, made 6, finished 2 under total, and like 3 under was going to get in, and I was devastated. I was like, this is idiot, just all of the things that we tell ourselves when it goes poorly. So I in my frustration, I went back to the clubhouse, start packing my bags. I'm like on my way back to my accommodation, staying with some family friends, and I get about 20 minutes down the road, maybe not 20 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and one of my good friends calls me. He's like, where are you? And I was like, oh, I'm headed back to the hotel. He's like, you idiot, you're in a playoff, get back here now. And I was like, holy, just, so I tell his cab driver, turn around, we got to stop, I got to get my golf clothes back on. And so I'm like getting changed in the back of this cab, and he drives me. The way it is at Sentosa is the course, like you got to drive to the other golf course. So I got the cab driver to drive like literally to the back of the tee, and there was 9 guys at 2 under playing for 1 spot. And so I get to the back of the tee, I'm in the 3rd group off, like straight on the tee, out of the car, like my luggage I just dumped. And so we play. I hole like a 15-footer for birdie on the 10th, and it was just me and one other guy, Danny Chia, a Malay guy, nice guy. And then we got to, so it's just 2 of us, and then we go to 18. So it's a long par 5, like 580, water all the way up the left, kind of dog legs around, or not dog legs, but wraps around the water. He hooks it in the water. And I'm like, all right, well, you just can't go left. so I get one up in the fairway, lay it up, and get it on the green there, like, I don't know, 30 feet away, just like he's probably going to make 7. I'm like, all right, you got 3 putts to get this done. And I did end up 3-putting to make for 6 to get through, but I got that 9th spot. I think I've been nervous in my time, but that was the most. So I think that definitely deserves one of the awards for most notable golf memory, to get through the 9-way playoff, and the power of the mind. The other one was, I never won a 4-round professional event until 2018, and I was actually in Tahiti with my now wife. She was caddying for me, and knew that, okay, I can win this tournament. I'm a good player. I was, and had a bad 3rd day. Went into the last day just like, you got to play really good. You got to play really good, and just went out and played. I was like 4 under through 8 holes. Played great, and to win that, obviously with her there, and just all of the, it's not a huge tournament, but having never done it as a pro, after all of the stuff as an amateur, was very, very satisfying for sure. So I'd probably put that one even. I mean, the amateur stuff was great memories, but ignorance is bliss too. Once you know all the other stuff, it's like, to get across that hurdle was very satisfying.
Both of those stories are crazy and beautiful at the same time. So the final question that we ask all of our guests is, now you're older, you're smarter, you know a little bit more, and ostensibly you have the keys to the kingdom. If you go back to yourself as a junior golfer and tell yourself just one thing, what would that one thing be?
Learn to listen to people. Probably. As a junior golfer, I would say learn to listen to people as a life lesson, but also I think from a golf standpoint, hit it as far as you can, and then figure it out.
Well, you hit it a long way right now. Is that something you've worked into your game?
It's gotten better, but I think it's interesting. I think I just gotten more efficient. like my club head speed when I was like 16 was like 116, 117. And I don't think I'm there now, at least not on the range, maybe on course at times, but I think I'm a lot more efficient. So I'm much better at getting the most out of where I'm at. It's probably something that, I mean, it's all over, golf media and everyone says, got to hit it far, got to hit it far, got to hit it far. You don't have to. It just makes it a little bit easier, but you still need to be straight too, right? So it's not giving that up. And I think one thing I notice a lot is none of the top guys play in their top gear. I watched a video the other day of Matsuyama with his swing speed like 131, and I mean his stats on the PGA Tour show that that's not what that is, right? And like Tony Finau can do like a 140, and he's playing at like 126. So it just puts some perspective in, like, okay, push your max so that you can play at 3/4 all the time, because you still need to get it in the fairway, get it in the green, like take care of those sort of basic stats to a degree, but know that there's extra gears there if and when you may need them or want them.
That makes sense. Well, wrapping up here, tell us where people could find you on social media or something like that if they want to reach out to you. And also, I know you have a few sponsors. Tell us about your sponsors if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been very fortunate to become an ambassador for Green Boom. It's an environmental oil cleanup product and company working on various eco technologies, and they've been amazing in terms of helping me, and also helping the environment. It's something that it's growing up in Australia, obviously after growing up in Asia and seeing the waterways there, and then growing up after that in Australia, going to the beach a lot. It is something that I feel is important to keep some focus on, and playing a lot in Asia and seeing waterways full of all kinds of plastics and terrible things. It's great to be associated with a company that's working on helping somewhat and kind of push the industry in that direction. In terms of my social media, it's just Tim Stewart Golf, whether it's Instagram, Twitter. I'm not the best at Twitter. I find it's a tricky environment to live in sometimes. Or my Facebook, which is T Stewart Golf, which is my kind of athlete page per se. If they're golfers or athletes, then that's my athlete page.
Thanks for joining us today. Please do us a big favor and like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts so we can help others learn how to play better tournament golf. You can find us online at thetournamentcode.com, on Instagram at thetournamentcode, and on Twitter at tournamentcode. As always, feel free to reach out to us at those places or email us at daniel@thetournamentcode.com and cooper@thetournamentcode.com. We hope you join us as we continue to dive deeper into what it takes to play elite tournament golf.